Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving straight into what is literally one of the biggest initial public offerings in financial history. We're talking about a company that has completely captured the world's imagination, watched its stock absolutely explode out of the gate, and then, well, almost immediately handed investors a massive dose of volatility.
Okay, so first, we really need to establish the sheer scale of the hype here. I mean, the institutional and retail demand was just off the charts right from day one. It pushed SpaceX to a peak market capitalization near a staggering $3 trillion. $3 trillion. The rush to buy into this was, frankly, historic.
But, then came the harsh reality check. Right after that explosive peak, the stock hit a brutal 3-day losing streak. Because, as we know, markets almost never move in straight lines. That initial wild excitement faded pretty quickly, and 3 consecutive days of heavy selling wiped hundreds of billions of dollars right off its market value. So this really begs the ultimate question that we need to unpack today. Was this just a case of early profit-taking, or is Wall Street suddenly waking up to a serious valuation problem? Like, are investors actually starting to question if SpaceX is worth that massive price tag? To figure that out, we're going to structure the facts today into 5 clear parts. First, the trillion-dollar roller coaster. Second, why is SpaceX falling? Third, the valuation debate. Fourth, buying SpaceX on blockchain. And finally, what happens next?
All right, let's kick things off with part 1, the trillion-dollar roller coaster. We'll look at the extreme highs and lows of this historic IPO.
When we trace the timeline, you can clearly see this wild whiplash. We go from that immediate surge right at the anticipated IPO launch, driven by that enormous demand we just talked about, straight up to the peak where it approached $3 trillion, and then bam, right into the correction. A multi-day sell-off erasing massive amounts of market value.
But, and this is absolutely crucial before anyone starts to panic, despite all those dramatic headlines and the hundreds of billions getting wiped out, the stock is actually still trading comfortably and significantly above its initial offering price. So no, the sky isn't falling. The market is really just recalibrating itself.
Which brings us to part 2. Why exactly is SpaceX falling? Let's unpack that nasty 3-day losing streak. There are 3 core drivers pulling the price down right now, and we're going to step through each one of them logically. That way, you'll have a totally clear picture of the market dynamics going on here.
The first big driver, valuation. Look, even after this correction, SpaceX remains one of the most valuable companies on the planet. But investors are starting to look around and ask, hey, do today's actual financial earnings justify a multi-trillion-dollar price tag? And honestly, the reality is, they don't. People aren't buying today's earnings. They're essentially buying into Elon Musk's futuristic 10-year vision.
The second driver is all about massive AI spending concerns. Because let's face it, SpaceX isn't just an aerospace company anymore. With the integration of xAI, literally billions of dollars are flowing into AI infrastructure, supercomputers, and massive data centers. And the problem making tech investors super anxious right now? Nobody knows exactly when or if these massive capital expenditures are actually going to generate meaningful profits. The market loves growth, sure, but eventually it demands proof that all this spending will create real earnings. And then third, we just have standard profit taking. Whenever an IPO becomes the absolute hottest trade on Wall Street, early investors are going to lock in those gains. It's just human nature and a completely normal market reaction. In fact, history shows us over and over that these blockbuster IPOs almost always experience sharp pullbacks before they settle into a more sustainable price.
Moving on to part 3, the valuation debate. Is the stock actually overvalued?
This debate is really tearing Wall Street apart right now. On one side, you've got the bears arguing that the expectations and the sheer amount of spending are just wildly unrealistic. They say the valuation is way too high and profitability is a total question mark. But then, on the flip side, the bulls counter that SpaceX is not just another aerospace company. It owns Starlink, it runs global launch services, satellite infrastructure, and of course it has those massive AI ambitions. The bulls are basically betting on the entire future space economy.
But ultimately, the bull's massive valuation really only makes sense if Elon Musk can successfully execute on this massive if. Combining space technology with artificial intelligence, that is entirely unprecedented. Now, if it succeeds, today's valuation might actually look like a total bargain down the line. But for right now, today's price is purely reflecting enormous expectations for future execution. All right, let's pivot to part 4, buying SpaceX on blockchain, and how crypto investors are getting in on the action.
So a lot of crypto investors out there just don't want to deal with opening a traditional brokerage account, right? Instead, they're turning to tokenized stock,
If you're not familiar, these are basically blockchain-based representations of publicly traded shares. They're issued by regulated platforms, which means you legally receive exposure to the actual stock price, all while trading entirely on blockchain infrastructure. Pretty cool, right?
But we need to issue a word of extreme caution here if you're looking into this. You really must follow the rules for on-chain exposure. First off, availability depends entirely on the laws in your specific country. Second, you have to verify that the platform you're using is licensed and regulated. And above all else, please avoid unbacked, unofficial SpaceX tokens. Listen, if a token isn't issued by a regulated provider, there's a very high chance it gives you absolutely zero legal claim to any actual SpaceX shares. Don't get burned there.
And finally, Part 5. What happens next? We're transitioning from that initial IPO excitement to the hard reality of valuation.
Look, a 3-day sell-off does not mean this IPO has failed. Not at all. It just means the market is sobering up a bit. Investors are starting to ask the really hard questions now. Can SpaceX truly justify a multi-trillion-dollar valuation just based on future promises? Are those massive AI investments actually going to pay off and generate profit? Or is Wall Street already losing its patience with all the spending? Only time is going to tell. But one thing is for sure, SpaceX is guaranteed to remain one of the absolute most closely watched companies in the world.
So, knowing everything we've covered today, the hype, the revolutionary tech, the massive AI spending, and of course, the future risks, I want to leave you with this final thought. If you had to lock away your portfolio today, which of these two disruptive assets would you bet your future on? Over the next 10 years, would you rather own Bitcoin or SpaceX?